Hello. When it comes to hinging forward at your hip joints, the muscles up the back of your legs need to be able to lengthen. So, if you're noticing that you are finding some restrictions when you're trying to move that pelvis forward, when you're trying to rotate that pelvis forward, then working on lengthening the muscles up the back of your legs is a really good idea. However, when it comes to stretching the muscles up the back of our legs, we need to make sure that we're being really honest with ourselves so that we're truly lengthening those muscles and not compensating elsewhere. Now, one of the stretches that I like to use to lengthen the back of the legs is the strap stretch lying down on your back. Now, if you've been taking my classes, you're going to be really familiar with this strap stretch, but I'm going to go over some compensations that can sometimes happen. So, rarely do people have the range of motion to get that leg straight up into the air. We just don't have that range from our habits through our lives, rarely. And so our one compensation that I see is that the knee will bend so that it appears that the leg is coming really close in towards you, but we're no longer lengthening the muscles that we are trying to lengthen. So our hamstrings up the back of your leg span both the knee joint and the hip joint. So it spans the two joints here. So when you bend that knee, you're shortening the distance between the two end points of the muscle, and instead when you've got that leg straight, you're lengthening those between those two end points. You're creating some length up the back of your leg. So when it comes to the strap stretch, when you bring the leg up into the air, it's much more important for the leg to stay straight, and maybe that means your foot is lower down than it is to bend the knee and bring the knee in towards you. Now, it's not to say that when you bend the knee, you won't feel a stretching sensation. You very well may still feel a stretching sensation. However, you're not creating the length in the muscles that we are targeting. So even if that knee is just slightly bent, you're still not creating the length in those muscles. So that's one compensation. And we need to leave ego at the door. I know that sometimes we look at our fellow classmates and maybe they can get with our leg up higher than the other, but leave ego at the door. It's about you finding your true length of your hamstring and working on lengthening for you and your body. So another compensation, and one that's probably more common and one that's a little bit more tricky to notice in your own body, is that when you move the leg towards you, is that pelvis might want to lift up and move with the leg. Now, obviously this leg wouldn't float up like this, but it may bend and have your foot onto the floor. So you can see how this movement's actually come from your spine curving rather than, if that pelvis was nice and flat and level, just only coming from your hip joint. So this is a big one and a tricky one to make sure that we're not doing. So making sure that your other leg is flat out onto the floor. That's a really good indicator that the pelvis has stayed still. If you're finding that this knee bends, then it's likelihood that it's because your tailbone's kind of floated up off the floor and you might have got the leg in really close towards you, but it's because that pelvis has moved with the leg. That's not what we're after. That again isn't changing the orientation between your pelvis and your leg, but instead it's changing the orientation in your spine, which again, we're not wanting to overuse if that's a compensation that you do use all the time anyway. So keeping the pelvis nice and flat and level, keeping the supporting or the lower leg down flat onto the floor and bringing that leg in. And even if that's how low the leg is, that's your length, that's your true length of your hamstring. The leg might be heavy there. And that's where you can do some working of just gently trying to ease the leg further in, relaxing, coaxing the muscles into a relaxed state. If you're feeling that you're the stretching feeling can be pretty addictive, and so sometimes we want to get to the most intense stretchy feeling that we can get to, but in actual fact our nervous system kind of panics and kind of grips on, so you're not able to relax and get that lengthen. So the less of a stretching sensation actually, the better. So dial it down, dial it back, and you'll get more lengthening up the back of your legs. Now, one thing I want to just point out is if this was the true length of your hamstring, and if I was to bring this leg up and assume that both legs were at the same length, which might not be true, that if I was to flip you up here, then that is your hip hinge. So keeping yourself honest, even if that means you are not hinging as far forward as you think you should be, rather than the pelvis reaching its limitation, but then rounding forward at your spine. I hope that makes sense to you. I thought it might be easier for you to see on something that doesn't have flesh on it. If you have any questions, then let me know. Thanks, bye.